Hey, welcome back to the channel. I'm back for a video that I thought I would do because I saw a video by some YouTubers that I have followed over the last few years. You may or may not recognize them. One in particular, Jake Rattlesnake and Andrew Wilson. They've started a new channel. Let me see. I believe it's called Not One Step Back. And they've done a video that I wouldn't mind commenting on and showing to the audience that I have. Now, this particular video is, like I said, about modern women, modern dating, feminism, that kind of stuff. I've never been one to claim I'm an expert on women, but my occupation for the last 20 years, working with women as a hairstylist and a color expert, has me spending from, anywhere from 3 to 4 hours with each client multiple times a day. So I've spent thousands of hours talking to women over the last 20 years. And I've been single for the last few myself and can say firsthand that modern dating is a mess. It's an absolute mess. So I thought this video would be a good way to sort of break it down and allow these two to sort of offer off or some of the points that I've been making for the last few years, and then elaborate a little bit more on them as well.
Whatever podcast shared this clip from the Call Her Daddy podcast. Let's have a listen.
When you're younger in your 20s, like, who the fuck wants to get married and settle down?
Yeah.
Some people, but not me at that point.
Yeah.
I was like, I want to feel the thrill. I want to be getting my head bashed into the mattress. I want to be getting flipped upside down, and then I want to be getting ghosted the next day. I want to have my heart ripped out of my chest, and I want to do it all over again, and then some. And then when you get a little older, you're kind of like, I literally don't have time.
Don't have.
Call Her Daddy podcast. I'm sure some of you have heard of it. Maybe this is new to some of you. I do know that most of the subscribers I have are male. I have, a small percentage of female as well, and I hope not to offend. That's not the goal of this video. But the Call Her Daddy podcast is probably one of the most disgraceful things on air, whatever you want to call it, on the internet. I call it I think of it as the equivalent to Jersey Shore. Jersey Shore was just one of those things that just destroyed the way that men and boys viewed and looked at women. It was pretty nasty, toxic show, and I remember watching that and thinking, yeah, this is going to do some damage to this next generation of young men. And shows like this Call Her Daddy podcast are doing exactly that with young women now. So let's listen to what they have to say about that little clip there, which, is obviously quite embarrassing.
Have time. So whatever says she's married, by the way, the fact that she did this stuff, it's a surprise a man would marry her. But to be speaking about it too, totally embarrassing for them both. The thing about this, Andrew, is this so perfectly encapsulates the exact messaging that is sold to young women these days. And there's no surprise here that is like the most popular female podcast in the entire world. It's go out, be
Some of you may remember the Call Her Daddy podcast was the podcast that had Kamala Harris, Kamala, whatever you want to call her. She was. That was the only podcast she would sit down with. So that's what the Democrats support. The Democrats support anything about female promiscuity, which, again, any type of promiscuity, not necessarily good for society. We will continue here.
a degenerate in your 20s, and then eventually when you're in your 30s, Prince Charming will come along and will put a ring on your finger, and then you'll live happily ever after. And it's sort of the same with this. Like Taylor Swift is the most popular icon among young females, and if you listen to all of her music, what is it? I knew you were trouble when you walked in. All of this basically different ex-boyfriend, make a song about it, take zero accountability, move on. In my 30s, and it's everyone else's fault. Men suck. Fuck Trump, fuck the patriarchy. So
now I've been saying for years, working with women, I've been saying this for years. In the mid 2000s, I'll say this: women were less offended by a lot of the things that I would point out, the obvious things that I would point out, the differences between men and women, and they were really open-minded to listening and actually appreciated a lot of the insight that I would offer. As the years went by, I started to notice that there was a degree of sensitivity to anything that I would start saying in respect to the natural dynamics between men and women. I mean, I was in the mid 2000s, it was not uncommon for my clients to blatantly flirt with me. It was not uncommon for me to bump into a client or, at a nightclub or a bar or something and have them, while married or with boyfriends, blatantly flirting and trying to quote unquote get with me. I knew even back then that there was a degree of promiscuity that was happening within the female community that was not necessarily quite as out in the open as it was for men. And I remember starting to talk about it a little back then. And now it's gotten completely out of hand. It's gotten completely out of hand. We'll continue to listen.
So, I mean, I'll handball it to you.
Well, there's two competing thoughts on this, inside of what you might perceive as the red pill community. You can take the Pearl Davis approach. Her approach seems to be, look, this has nothing to do with feminism or indoctrination. This is just how these fucking bitches are. That's her words exactly, right? That's just how these bitches are. And that's how women are, and that's why you have to have some type of curtail on female freedom, or this is what you get, right, inside of society. That's the one sort of angle.
Now, I'll say this. I'm not really a strong advocate for Pearl's message. If anybody knows who Pearl Davis is, she is quite the shock jock type content creator. She says things that really kind of just... it's that rage bait type clickbait stuff. She doesn't have, she has some things right. I mean, she's the female version of Andrew Tate and or at least was the female version, or is the female version of what Andrew Tate was. Yeah, we will continue.
Which I disagree with. The second is that through liberation theology, or ideology, which has become a new form of theology for the Sewing Circle Christians, through this liberation mindset for feminists, sexual liberation is a big one. The thing is that accountability is a thing which is catching up. It caught up with men very early. And here's how accountability caught up with us in society very quickly.
And this brings me to sort of the main rounded point about this video that I wanted to elaborate on, accountability. I've talked about it in the past. I've talked about it in quite a few videos in the past. Accountability on both sides, men and women. But like Andrew says here in this video, accountability for men has kind of always been a thing. We've always had to take accountability for our mistakes and misbehaviors that we, if we get caught cheating, we're a piece of scum. If a woman gets caught cheating, there's a reason. There's a deeper underlying reason as to why she did it. But for men, we're just scum. We're to be written off and canceled. So we've always had to face that degree of accountability for our actions. And when I was a hairstylist, the one thing I recognized, and as I was mentioning before, was women were actually, if not, as or more promiscuous than men were. And it was starting to take place, and I was noticing it then. And I think, we've talked about, not on this channel, but I mean, it's all over the place. People are always talking about the patriarchy and how women are hypergamous. They date up, and in some cases across when it comes to equality. A woman wants a man who's taller. She wants a man who's stronger. She wants a man who's more financially successful. She wants a man, one up on her in every aspect. They get into it a little bit more here, and I'll talk a little bit more about it once they get going here.
Was when it came to divorce and family separation and things like this, the man essentially, due to the laws of the United States, got the short end of the stick almost every single time. And so men were held to a much more rigorous accounting for their actions because there was a lot more risk involved. And there's a lot more social shame when you lose custody of your kids. It was like, oh, you didn't fight hard enough for them. You didn't do all the things you were supposed to do for them. So that's why you lost them. And then there was some stigma that went along with that. Women essentially bypassed all of that stigma for about 40 years.
I used to say that all the time. I used to say in the mid 2000s to my buddies who didn't want to believe me, but I used to tell them, I think women cheat more than we think they do. And I think that because they don't talk about it. They don't talk about it with their, close friends. Maybe one best friend gets the scoop. But when women are cheating or being, adulterous, they don't talk about it. It was something to be ashamed of, so they wouldn't openly discuss it. But unfortunately, that's starting to change now. Women's egos have become so inflated due to social media and the ability to change and alter their appearance online and their image online to seem far different than what reality is, generating a lot of attention that is unwarranted, that can create a lot of delusion, self-delusion. And unfortunately, our society is full of these young, delusional women now who won't give the opportunities they would have given if they weren't so brainwashed by the egos that they've built up in their own minds due to their social media personas. And so you've got this huge block of young men who are getting ignored by young women, and you've got this a gigantic block of women who are all dating the same men because they only date the men that they believe are quality enough. And let's be real, there's not that many great looking men on the planet. Let's keep going.
Or longer, right? They just were able to bypass that stigma. Now, though, that stigma is finally catching up with them, that accountability, the idea that people are actually looking at it and going, maybe having your mattress bashed in the head and getting flipped around and turned out and going to gangbangs at night isn't such a good idea. Maybe Ashley St. Clair going and getting knocked up by Elon Musk in order to go have your palace, it wasn't such a great idea, right? There's some type of accountability finally catching up, and women don't know exactly how to deal with that yet because it collectively hasn't been done to them yet. So as the discussed reaction to more and more of this.
See, I think that accountability in respect to women in our society, I don't think necessarily that women are actually taking accountability. I think there is a bit of a boiling point that's going to take place. I think we're almost there. And I think that's kind of what they're trying to say in this video, or at least what Andrew Wilson is trying to say, is that with all the eyes that society are focusing on women's actions these days, thanks to a lot of this, red pill and manosphere and content, you've got a lot of young men who are starting to get good advice and helping them go back to the old days. I mean, I fell for the wokeness for a little while. I fell for the feminism nonsense for a little while. I think a lot of us did, despite, it was hard for me not to, working in the industry, in the field that I do, working with women and LGBTQ and all that stuff in my industry. But it just didn't ever feel natural to be, looking at the things that were taking place in our society and what they were trying to push down our throats. But people are waking up, and I think we are looking at a point now where women are starting to get exponentially lonelier in our society. I'm seeing it firsthand in my interactions with women, my clients. So many of them are struggling to find partners. So many of them are talking more and more about terrible dates, and more of them are talking about giving up on dating. I've been hearing about men giving up on dating for years and years, myself included. It's gotten difficult on both ends. And I think we are starting, like I said, to reach a boiling point where women at some point, it's just going to be, they're going to start waking up in massive, massive numbers. So young man, I do believe that the pendulum is swinging back, and I do believe that it's going to be, we're going to start working towards actually having harmony between men and women again. But
happens, which it is, and more videos like this are happening, that sort of accountability will be there. But nobody knows what that looks like ultimately, because women collectively have never really had to experience it, right? They just never had to experience it.
Yeah, it doesn't really feel like there's that much accountability going on. Obviously, if there is this sort of, at least some sort of like a shock to the system happening with all of the different cultural influences and pushbacks that are happening.
There is some accountability which is finally happening. For instance, men are getting custody of their kids more. It's not just defaulting to women anymore. Men's rights.
This, I believe, is true. I raised my son I do know some more men out there that are actually having a lot more access to their children and getting, in some cases, even, split or full custody. So that is taking place, of course. But again, I mean, the stigma in our society, especially Canada. I mean, I think Rattlesnake Jake is from, I believe, Australia, and Andrew's American. Very different cultures when it comes to liberalism. I mean, Canada is just an absolute mess. I don't even want to get into the politics going on in Canada at the moment. But I think one of the most important topics we can do is really trying to find that harmony between men and women again. Let's create those gender roles. Let's bring the pink and blue jobs back. I'm sorry. I'm all about the traditional style relationships. And I think more and more women are going to be waking up to wanting that back soon, as well, as the world is proving to be a very difficult place. And let's be honest, women, they don't operate alone very well. Men, we're not as emotional beings. So for us to live alone and die alone, we can just kind of accept it. Women historically don't accept that very well. And that just goes to show that, we're better together than we are apart. Let's keep going.
Advocacy groups have done a pretty good job of pushing some of those laws in. People are focusing on the divorce rates and the divorce stats. People are starting to look at this. Now, I agree with you that collectively women are not experiencing mass accountability in society the way that men did for the last, 40, 50, 60 years. But it seems like the trend is moving that direction. That's my whole point, right? It seems like it's moving there, that there's some kind of accountability that they're finally going to start experiencing. What that woman was doing there, the only reason she had to be so apologetic about kind of running feminist apologetics, like, oh, when you're in your 20s, you don't want to get married. You want to go out and get banged by a bunch of dudes and be a skank and this, right?
The amount of girls that I went to high school with and in my 20s, they wouldn't even give me the time of day. And then to see them in their 30s and mid 30s, all of a sudden, reaching out to the guys that they ignored in high school and reaching out to guys they typically never would have dated. That was pretty funny to watch, if I'm being completely honest. All these people believing that they were choosing these people because they were ready to settle down, when in reality, they just couldn't tame their bad boy. That's really all it came down to, is being unable to tame their bad boy. And the problem is now they want to settle down with this, guy that they didn't really see in the light that they saw the bad boy. And they're never going to have that chemistry that relationships sort of depend on in order to keep a woman faithful. It goes both ways. And now, I hope these guys are right, and I hope that the accountability is going to start taking place and people are going to start waking up, because, I mean, it's sad. It's sad out there. Like I say, I mean, I talk to a lot of lonely girls and a lot of lonely women nowadays, and it wasn't like this 10 years ago. It wasn't. So that's really all I wanted to get into on this particular video. It's not really, they kind of go over the same thing for the most part throughout the rest of the video, but just wanted to chime in something that I thought I would create short video to share, and hopefully you guys like it. If you like and subscribe, please hit that, and we'll see you back here again. Okay.